some people see like the inconveniences of like, oh, we're going to have to do extra work because of accessibility. It's like, yeah, that little bit of extra work you do, that 5% extra work is going to mean the world to somebody else.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to UX Murder Mystery. I'm Brian Crowley.
Hi, guys. I'm Eve Eden.
And today we're joined by Yaddy Arroyo. Yaddy, tell everybody who you are.
I've been in UX for like a couple of decades. It's forever. And it's multimodal UX. So it's like anything, like any type of interface or zero UI, so it's voice or anything. I've been in banking for I think 10 years straight. I forget. It's been a while. I love doing stuff with accessibility. That's my jam. In fact, that's why I'm here.
Yeah. So speaking of accessibility, we're gonna be talking today about accessibility, and I want to start with telling a little story that we're going to launch into and kind of go into today. So let's picture a hit TV show about a blind superhero, a guy that lost his sight as a boy and learned to read a room by sound, by heat, by rhythm, could hear a heartbeat across the streets. The kind of hero that a disabled community has been waiting decades to see. Now, picture the blind person sitting down to watch it and not able to follow a single scene. This happened, and the strangest part is not only that it happened, but this has happened multiple times. So we're going to talk about, in April 2015, Netflix dropped the show Daredevil. Daredevil is about a blind superhero named Matt Murdock, who's a lawyer by day and then a blind vigilante at night. It was prestige television. Critics have loved it, and it shipped with no audio description, no narration track to tell blind people what is happening on screen. So the one audience that should have been able to follow along and enjoy and anticipated this show was left out of this. Now, luckily, there was a real life hero, a blind journalist and activist named Robert Kingett. I hope I'm saying that name right. Based right here in Chicago. And he had already been fighting this fight. NPR reported in 2015, when he heard Daredevil would have no audio description, he started advocating online. He began an accessible Netflix project that he had started in 2012. And they had a hashtag called Dare to Describe. The petition, according to the outlet Good, cleared 3,000 signatures in a matter of days, and Netflix reversed course and added audio description to Daredevil first, and then also expanded it to the rest of the TV shows that they had at the time, like Orange is the New Black, et cetera, et cetera. So we would think that this is a happy ending, except for the fact this technology already existed. So Yaddy, this is where I wanted to talk to you about this. You've been inside these orgs for 15 years or more, right? When it's sitting right there and you can execute on it and it still doesn't ship, what is happening in that room?
Oh man. So I don't want to be a cynic, right? But I just flashed back to like an old company I worked at where the leader, the brand new leader, because he came in and was brand new leader, he didn't really know banking. Why? Like, I don't understand why. Like, at least get educated on it. And he started making fun of disabled people, right? For what? No, not unprompted. And then he didn't know this because we were on a Zoom call. This was, during the pandemic. And someone who was clearly disabled kind of asked him a question about like something or other about the process or accessibility. He's like, yeah, we don't need that. Right. We don't. And it's like, so I'm like, we're a bank and we could get sued. And like, that's number one. Like, first of all, like that's like, first of all, don't be a dick. But second of all, like number one, like think about the money and like the amount of money you can get sued. And like, this is the same guy that took out the accessibility process because it slowed us down. But honestly, you know how much it slowed us down? A week. It was 1 week. We already had, like, an amazing flow. So part of me is like, this guy is just, like, wanting to change things, and was a dick. I don't think that's what's I hope that's what wasn't happening with, like, you know, this situation, the story, right? But, like, yeah, I hope not. I actually assume not, right? I think it was just tone deaf on Netflix part, where it's like, we have a disabled superhero, and we forgot to accommodate, right? Like, I hope it's as minor as that. I suspect it is, but you do have the very egregious cases of people just being like just cruel, right? Like, because that's the reality. Like, if someone's making fun of disabled people at a town hall with a bunch of UXers, and like half of them are like older, the other half like maybe have some sort of hidden disability, like you don't know who you're talking to, you don't know who you're offending, and you know disabilities come in all shapes and sizes. So I say, like, in this case, I mean, yeah, it's definitely tone deaf. It's appalling, it's sad and ironic. Like, I mean, out of all of this, it's super ironic because, I mean, hello, like, here you have an opportunity to connect with a superhero that connects with many other little like, you get to see yourself up there, right? Like, if you're disabled, if you're blind, you're deaf, you're nonverbal, like, you see someone like you on screen, you feel recognized, you feel seen. A lot of times these people already are marginalized, and on top of that, like, sometimes belittled by the very existence, right? Like, not being able to climb a curb, right? So the curb lips were made, right? Like,
Mhm.
we don't know how hard it is for people. We really don't until we're in their situation. So the least we could do is just listen, right? And then there was like a lack of listening, and I feel that that's like the biggest issue. Whether it was uh done on purpose to be like cruel, I doubt it. I doubt Netflix was that intentional, right? But we have to address it. Like, there are people like that in the world, and I've seen them and I've worked with them, and they're no fun, right? You don't want to work with them. And then you have the other end where it's like they're not malicious, but they still didn't consider everybody, right? Like, they forget that inclusive design means everybody. And it's actually, to your point, Brian, like, the technologies have always been there. Like, not always, but like since I've been alive, there's always been people with disabilities. So there's always been people that have been advocating for equality, or at least some sort of equity when they deal with like media or physical obstacles, right? That's why, like, in banking, accessibility is huge. Right. You
Yeah.
have to have like smaller counters for people in wheelchairs. You have to have like accessibility doors, like where you can push a button and the door opens for you, right? There's all these little things that you have to do to make sure that everyone gets helped. And what people don't realize is, if you help like the most constrained user, you actually help everybody, right? Because I don't know how many times like I've pressed that little button with my like elbow because I'm like I'm carrying my kid in the stroller, right? Like,
Oh
I'm
yeah.
not disabled, but like my elbow, like I can't move and I have to open the door. So like, designing for one person designs for everybody, right? So that's kind of how I see it.
Let me add to this too, Yadi, and I want you to kind of react to this. So I think people assume accessibility serves a small group, but what you just said really is one of the biggest misconceptions. So with that, good accessibility practices often improves the experience for many users. I'm going to just throw some examples out there, and I want you to react. When you go to a restaurant and you see the menu, especially with older, they're going to hate that. With a demographic in low light conditions,
Yep.
they can't see the font. Um, what you brought up, especially when you're talking about using a digital product, and I see phones, I see people using their phones, and I see the fonts being increased. So all the lines are wrapping like 6 more times around. And so to me, that's like a group that is actually probably a larger group, because you're talking about like the baby boomers, Gen X, older millennials. And so, it feels like what you're touching on is, oh, it's a small group, and so it kind of get, lost or falls between the cracks. But actually, you're just talking about this may be impacting lots of people that we are not, we're taking for granted.
Yeah. I mean,
I,
you hit a good point there.
I feel you on the font thing. I mean, that's why I have the glass. I mean, I can't tell you how many times my
We're not
wife
going to
and
say
I
what
go to,
generation you're in.
well, I can't. We literally, my wife and I went to a restaurant, and I was like, "Oh shit, I don't have my glasses."
Yeah.
And she and then I have to ask her the bill or the menu to read, to be able to read it, because I can't really see anything.
That's the
Nobody
solution.
nobody thought about the use case of pulling out your phone and using the flashlight in a restaurant. How many people thought of that?
Right.
Nobody. I'd be actually, let us know if you thought about that. But I think that use case is just, it's like the desired path versus, oh, we know what the path is and we're designing for it.
Yeah, that's a loaded question. So I'll try to tackle it piece by piece, right? So I would
Sure.
say absolutely what you said, right? Because I said like a small percentage. Yeah, a small percentage of known disabilities, right? But then we have the hidden disabilities, and then we have the situational disabilities, right? Situational could be like, I'm young, but I need to wear glasses, and I'm, farsighted, so I need, it's hard for me to see a menu as it is with light. Right? So it's one of those things, like, you never know what obstacles are going to be like part of the experience, right? Like what friction points. So a lot of times, like actually designing for AI has helped me a lot, right? Because in AI, I start
Yeah.
with use cases and I go crazy. I zoom out. Like I'm like, like use cases upon use cases and sub use cases and sub use cases, right? So like an example would be making a payment, right? But then a sub use case would be like, it's late. And then another use case is I'm broke. And then the other use case is because I'm disabled and I haven't had a job for a year. Right. So it's almost like you start like realizing, and then you expand out and in and out and in. And once you do that exercise, you'll pick up that even people, maybe some people that are farsighted and can't see nearsighted, right? They're not technically blind. They're not technically disabled. They just have glasses, right? um but the same person that is maybe legally blind has the same issue, right? And then you start noticing those patterns, and then you solve for those patterns, like maybe have a light at the table, or maybe have like digital menus where you can zoom in as much as you want on your own phone, right? Or maybe have a tablet menu. I mean, a lot of people, what we do, like with my mom, I have to read her the menu. And sometimes she gets so frustrated, but she doesn't want to admit to her like limitations, right? Because she's at that age where she just does not want to admit has limitations. So she'll like just pretend she's not hungry. Oh, I don't want to eat anyway. And it's like, all right, mom, they have burrito, and I'll get the menu of burritos and tortas and this and that. And she's like, all right, I'll have a torta. Like she'll like be like, all right, I'll do it for you. But it becomes like also like a badge of dishonor, right? Having to ask for help. So like, can we just make it less shitty for people, right? Like, or what's the word I'm looking for? Something that's more like kosher, like helpful, right?
Well, Yadi, Eve and I were talking just before you hopped on, and one of the things that we were mentioning was, and I was curious to ask you this because you've designed for with accessibility. Eve and I were both talking about how one of the things that we've heard has been, and this is also something that falls into the category of DEIA, which is the
Mm-hmm.
whole concept of being able to bring people in to the design process. And I think I can only think of twice that I've had a colorblind
Yeah.
designer, and then we had a colorblind stakeholder. Those are the two times I can think of where I've designed with somebody who had an impairment. But like, I'm curious to know from you all, have you all had that experience of bringing in the people that have the disabilities? Or
I
talk to us
have.
about that. Tell us about those stories.
But to your point though, I could count them on one hand, right? On one hand, I
Yeah,
can count. So that's I mean, as you were saying, the colorblind thing, I got lucky because one of my like project managers was colorblind, and I
yeah.
only found out like 2 years working into like with him, and he's like, yeah, with your designs, I don't have to worry. because like I'm able to distinguish the colors. And I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, I'm colorblind. I'm like, this whole time, so it's an accident, right? Like it was an accident for me. But like now his feedback makes sense because all the feedback he would give me was very precise. It was about it from his POV, which was like, I can't tell the difference between, and by the way, I didn't even know there was different type of color blindness.
Yeah.
And obviously there's the red and green, and then there's other ones. So he was telling me about his, and I was like, what?
Oh yeah.
Like,
There's like
what?
five, six different types, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And that's when you start realizing like, shit, like I need to get like educated on this, right? And the good thing is the same bank that like hired the dumb that's what I'm going to call him from now on. I don't want to call him the cruel jerk, but they hired that guy that like just did not understand accessibility. Also hired a blind coder. So that person was so cool to work with because like they did not hold back. Yes, were a developer and they coded, but they served as QA. I mean, clearly, like any project that we had any concerns about, like they're like, no, and opinionated, highly opinionated. And I loved it. I was like, thank you. Like that was one of the moments where like, first of all, humbling. Second of all, it makes you realize that like, no matter how much I try to put myself in their shoes, I won't. I can't. Hire disabled people so that they can actually tell you like from a personal experience, from a human friction standpoint, like this is what hurts me, this is what ails me, this is what like would be better for me, right? Like don't assume. And I would say like there's a lot of people that I've worked with like outside of official like work channels. Like I would say like the Chicago scene, right? There's this one lady, Michelle Novak, who's like a super researcher. And one of the most humbling things she told me, she's like, they should just hire disabled people. They should just like put them in like, and I'm like, oh yeah, instead of me trying to empathize, it's like, yeah, let's put them in charge of like certain things. Like if we can, like sometimes that's not possible. That's fine. Like um, you don't have to have the criteria to serve the mission, right? But you do have to have enough people like either in your research groups or in your like surroundings, like whether stakeholders or whatever, to kind of like be that litmus test because it's so easy for us to forget. And by the way, that's probably what happened with Netflix. They didn't have it as part of their ops workflow, right? That they didn't care enough, But like now maybe they do, right? Now it's a
Yeah, of
checklist
course.
in their workflow. Right? That's what we have to do.
Right.
Just, automate it. Not automate it, but like include it in our thinking.
So yeah, with that, like that incomplete information that usually leaders have when they're trying to make decisions, they're probably just coming at it from an incomplete information. And so from like a UX problem, how do we, what do we do to bring that important information to leadership in order to have, or to the ops team, right? In order to have that become part of their process.
Oh man, I wish I had an answer for that. I mean, I can tell you what I do, right? I nag.
That's what we
I
want to
become
know.
so annoying. I'm the most
You become
annoying person
annoying.
right? And that's the thing. I mean well, and people know me, and I'm neurodivergent, so I can get away with it, right? Because they're like, "Oh, that's Yachty being a, insistent." But that also works in my favor, right? Because they know I won't let it go. I won't let it go until they listen to me, right? And a lot of times that works because they're like, "Oh, we just want you to shut up." And then this is the cool part. I'm usually right when I nag. I don't nag just like to be a jerk. I nag because I'm like, guys, I'm seeing a problem, and the problem is the stability. Like you're not doing accessible products, and they can sue us for this. And by the way, the bank that took away the accessibility process got sued 2 years later. Right. That's the interesting part that I knew that would happen, but they never linked it up to this one dude. Right. That's the problem. There's no accountability when you're so big. So that's also the problem. Make people accountable. Right. So, like, in addition to my nagging, it's like I point a big old flashlight at the problem. Right. I'm like, yep, look at that guy. That guy doesn't want to do anything about it. And then all of a sudden they're on the spotlight and they're forced to like shit or get off the pot. They're like, all right,
I think you touched on something really important, which is bringing a use case of like market research to
Mhm.
to the uninformed executives. I think that is huge, right? Because not only does that kind of bring the information in front of them so that they can make the decision to ignore it or pursue with that info, but it also essentially kind of shines the on how much UX should be at the strategy table. And so
Yep.
we do that, it's kind of what we're really doing too is building a bridge of connecting UX metrics, UX issues um, to the business outcomes, the customer experience, the risk, brand trust, growth. I think
Mhm.
those are really, those kind of ladder up, and that really does kind of perk up the executives' ears when they hear, I think, market research of here's essentially a similar industry, or in this case, another bank. This is what happened to them. So let's prevent that instead of
Yep.
going down that same road.
I love the way you phrased it because my nagging is one way of phrasing it, but you're like, let me make it into something that makes sense for executives. No, executives need to see the numbers, right? But also,
Mhm.
you also have to read the room, right? Some executives, like, yes, they care about the numbers, but if you actually like show them like observation, right? Like literally videos of people struggling, like it's amazing how much like they'll be embarrassed, like they see an old lady struggling to open the door because they don't have accessible doors, right? And that old lady happens to be their mother. You know, like it's all about like psychology too. Like, well, how do you get your message across? Because some executives, they really don't care.
Yeah.
Because like a lot of the problems I've raised, imagine like having the boss I told you about. He doesn't care. He's already shown disdain for people like that, right? So like how do you get across? Well, like sometimes it's about talking to his boss and like letting his boss feel the pain, and then that boss kind of bringing down the hammer, right? So it's about like a lot of different approaches. It's not just about data, but like how do you psychologically get through to someone that maybe doesn't want to see that problem because for whatever reason, like maybe it hits close to home, right? Like I have a disabled kiddo, right? So I took the turn of I'm hyper protective of disabled people, right? Like I am super, like all of a sudden everybody to me is like, I must protect, like everybody's my kid now, right? My mother, on the other hand, took the other turn, right? She has this disdain for disabled people except my kid. And that hurts my heart. Like we actually had an argument about it and she doesn't understand like why I would be hurt, but I'm like some people get like offended or hurt or like disappointed or whatever you want to name it in terms of like I have this person in my family and I can't reconcile that in my head, so I'm just going to
Mhm.
ignore it, right? So how do you get through to those executives that are
How,
defensive?
Yadi, I'm curious to know from you, just to go off onto, because I knew you brought up your son, and I wanted to actually talk about your son a little bit. How did that change your point of view? How has that changed your point of view? How do you see yourself as a designer before and then after having your kid and experiencing firsthand?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you guys a quick story so you connect the dots, right? So before I had my kiddo, I mean, I always thought of myself as an accessibility person. I mean, just standard, just to me, it's almost like you're in banking, you have to be accessible. Like it wasn't even a question, right? But one time I went home for this is right before I had the kid, and it was COVID. So I went back to Texas to celebrate with my mom and her family friend. And her family friend had a nanny. Like, so I guess she's an older lady, so it's not a nanny, a caregiver. So the caregiver had a blind son that only spoke Spanish, right? And I really connected with her son, right? And it turned out that like her family also had another blind person, someone that was going to go blind. So they knew they were going to lose their sight. So before they lost their sight, they started this organization for Spanish speaking blind people in South Texas. Right. So, like, being with several of those people in one room for one Thanksgiving, like, really just gave me like an appreciation for like, and also like understanding of what I was lacking at work, right? Like
Mhm.
they had a hard problem accessing banking services. And to me, banking is like water and like air and like food. Everybody needs banking. Everybody needs to pay their bills. They need to move money. They need to get paid. So to me, I was like appalled. I'm like, these kids, like, and they were kids. A lot of the people in the association were younger people, right? So I was asked to speak at this association and I got gag ordered by the bank, right? That's how I found out they got sued. Coincidentally, I got gag ordered because they're like, oh, we're specifically being sued by Hispanic, by Spanish speaking blind people. Not the same association. It was another like group of people that wanted to file a class action suit against this bank. And they're like, you can't talk. You can't talk because obviously there's this lawsuit and we don't want to get, whatever. So I couldn't even help them, right? On my own accord. And that's when like the fire was lit and I changed banks. I was like, I'm not going to work for these fuckers anymore. Like, fuck them big time. I hate them. Like, how dare they? Right. This is before I had the kid. Once I had the kid, that decision itself was a hard one because like they give you the option. Do you want to have do you want to like abort the kid or do you want to keep the kid? Right. And I never considered myself political. But in that moment, I'm like, well, I'm keeping the kid. Like, there's no like, it is what it is. I'll deal with it. Right. It has been hard. It has been hard because a lot of the issues are stuff that I didn't expect, right? Like with disabilities comes additional medical care. And then that gave me an even greater empathy because I'm like, oh my God, like we only see one dimension of it. Like some people see like the inconveniences of like, oh, we're going to have to do extra work because of accessibility. It's like, yeah, that little bit of extra work you do, that 5% extra work is going to mean the world to somebody else. Right. And you see how much like how the payoff is in the end. Like just a little bit of work actually helps so much. And, once I had the kid, all of a sudden, like everything kind of came together. Like I was a decent human being before, but all of a sudden it became my life mission to like, hey man, we got to take care of each other. And like the one disenfranchised group, the people that can sometimes maybe not even speak for themselves, right? Because disabilities come in all shapes and sizes. There's cognitive, there's physical, there's emotional disabilities too. There's physical that comes from like chronic illness, right? And situational, like we mentioned before, right? So like it made me kind of contextualize like, man, like why is it that we don't do it? Why don't we just do that extra 5, 10, 2% to just make sure the more people can be
Yeah.
accommodated? And a lot of
Yadi,
times it's
let me ask you this. I'm sure there's designers listening to this story right now, and I think what they maybe want to ask you is, what is accessibility challenge that you encounter in everyday life that most designers would never think to test for?
I mean, I think cognitive for me, because that's my kid, has cognitive disabilities. So to me, that's probably the forefront. Like, I mean, mobility too, because people don't realize that I'll give you guys another story. My mom has pre-diabetes, so she has hand issues because like you get neuropathy, so you can't feel stuff anymore, and people don't realize that. So she was not like that before, and then she grew into it. So not being able to like feel the buttons or feel the movement or feel the phone or even grasping it and being in pain. So someone that has, arthritis, right? Like it doesn't even have to be diabetes or neuropathy, but it could be like arthritis, pain of the bones and joints, like the inability to reach certain buttons, right? So like
Yeah.
so you combine both of those cognitive and like physical, right? And I look at some of these apps and they have buttons everywhere. I'm like, well, is there a way to make it more simple, right? Because you're exposing all these options, like everything. You're exposing everything and you're not making it cognitively easy for me. So I would say that's probably the biggest one where I see everybody putting the kitchen sink into something without considering progressive disclosure, right? Like that's my biggest
Mm.
pet peeve. It's like you show me everything and I don't know what to do. Like some of these things are like, what the right? But then I don't know. I almost feel like progressive disclosure got lost throughout the years. That's something that we did early on. And then through time, it kind of just like everybody just started putting everything on a page? So I think
There
that's the
may
biggest
be
one for me.
people listening to you about progressive disclosure. Could you give it maybe just like a one-liner, what that means?
Yeah, don't show everything at once. Like let's say you have like 10 features, right? Can you bucket them? And can you show them by relatedness, right? So an example would be like how in Word, maybe if you want to edit a font, right, don't show like bold and italics and underline and font size and all this unless they click on a button that tells you I want to edit my font. Imagine having all those exposed and then you have all the other fields exposed, right? Tuck them in somewhere. That's progressive disclosure. Just like tapping to expose like from a parent type of menu to a child menu, right? Or like from something that's basic like 5 patterns, like A, B, C, and D, right? A being colors, B being like numbers, C being like, I don't know, soldiers, like bucketing things together and disclosing them as the user tells you or shows you what their intention is, right? Once you understand the intention,
Perfect.
you can kind of show. Yeah, sorry for the
So
long explanation.
Yadi, no, it's okay. Yadi kind of compromised her intro. She actually holds multiple patents for related to AI and UX innovation, particularly around multimodal AI interactions and virtual assistants. So I'm sure people would love to pick your brain on where do you see the greatest accessibility opportunities with AI?
Oh man. Well, I think the interesting one that I'm looking at is adaptive UI. Everybody mentions adaptive UI. That's a normal concept, right? But I want to introduce the concept of an adaptive UI that degrades gracefully with time, right? So I'll give you guys a context. I'm working on a memory app, right? And when I'm like, the research has told us that as people age and their cognitive decline increases, right? They actually are less adaptive, right? So like they can go from touch and then all of a sudden they can't do touch anymore. They have to do voice only, right? So being able to have an adaptive UI that degrades gracefully is a concept that's rarely talked about. Everybody always talks about like, oh, let's have adaptive UI where, it'll customize to what you want and this and that. Okay, sure, that works for like maybe some use cases or maybe 80% of them, right? But what they're not thinking about is like, what about the people that don't want to use the product but have to? Right? That's the population I'm thinking about. And those are the people that don't want to use technology. So how do you degrade it to a point where they can understand it? Right. So that I think is a big one people don't think about. Another one is just doing basic, like I'm talking about basic stuff like screen reader stuff. Organize your stuff correctly, right?
Yeah.
Like label headers the right way, even just labeling things the right way in code, right? It's not the UX that you see, it's the UX you don't see. Right. And QAing that, like just QA your work if you can, like even if it's in post and they don't let you QA before you launch, queue it afterwards and then write in a ticket. Like make sure it works because there's simple things we can do to simplify everybody's lives, but people don't understand or don't know about it yet. So that I think is a big one.
Speaking of AI and accessibility, the elephant in the room, so to speak, was Jacob Nielsen's article about accessibility and AI. I want to just touch on that real quick. So 2 years ago, he published a piece called Accessibility Has Failed, Try Generative UI equals Individualized UX, which kind of talks a little bit to what you were speaking about there. His argument runs in two parts. One, accessibility is too expensive. Two, it's doomed for the worst experience, especially for blind users who he says are stuck with one-dimensional audio interface laid over a two-dimensional screen. So he thinks that his solution is let AI generate a fresh, personalized interface for every user, every session. There was a lot of pushback, per Axbom pushback, and there were several other folks that wrote articles about it. The question I guess is, could there be a truth to what he was saying, even if his conclusion is wrong? What do you think about that?
I would say the way he phrased it is wrong, right? And I would also say that like the fact that he is who he is gives him more authority than maybe he deserved in that specific article, right? Because he is an authority to some extent in UX, but I can tell you there's also physical UX and it's not one dimensional. One example is Braille. That's touch. Another example is haptics. So him saying like that users only have one dimension, which is audio, it's wrong. Like that is literally wrong, right? And we know that because there's physical devices. I mean, even the stuff that I'm working on, like our end goal is a med tech device. Right. So we're starting in digital, but we want to go with physical. Why? Because we know that the olfactory senses bypass the hippocampus for memories, and that actually helps trigger memory. So knowing physical, like that's the thing that people don't realize. UX is more than just a digital screen. It's actually the human experience, whether that's in digital form or physical form. So I would say with Nielsen, the adaptive part is maybe right. Like having screens adapted to how users want to use them is not a wrong thing to say, but to say that accessibility is expensive is incorrect. Not having accessibility is expensive, right? Like he missed one word there, right? Which is like
Yeah,
not
yeah.
having it. But it's unfortunate because his words carry a lot of weight. Therefore, like a lot of accessibility teams have been cut, right? And I've unfortunately been part of that situation where I've
Oh,
seen
wow.
great people get cut, and it's been a year later after that article. But like it's hard not to draw conclusions that that's the type of article that helped justify eliminating a whole like 20 team group of people that saved the bank millions, right? Because you bet your butt they're going to get sued. Like it's just a matter of time now, because now you don't have those gatekeepers that can help like make sure that you're aligned. So I would say that he's right and wrong. He's right about the basics, but he's wrong about how he phrased it. Like that is so incorrect, and so it's hurtful to our industry actually.
One of the loudest critiques was that he never says how an AI would even know that you're disabled to begin with.
Yeah.
And then how it would know then how to generate a correct interface. So what do you think about that gap? Is that a closable gap, or is that just kind of like a bunch of people just hand waving, like
No, I mean,
it'll happen magically.
magical happened. I think there is hand waving happening, but also what we forget is human input, right? Like yeah, if I tell the system, and the system has memory of it, that I'm disabled in X, Y, and Z way, like I'm not able to see well or I can't hear well, and the system remembers, then that's one input that the system can use to kind of adapt my UI. But people forget that. Like so whenever I create designs and I do, IP stuff, I always think about, how what role do humans play? And that's what people like the magical hands forget, right? Like you can't just have auto magically stuff happen. You have to like actually think like have human-centered design, for fuck's sake. Like please, like think about the human, and then think about like, all right, how can we ask the human not in an annoying way? Right. Because that's the thing too. You can ask the human all these questions and get all these answers, which by the way, they're called prompting. You're prompting the human for answers. But like that's annoying. So how can you do it organically, right? So what you'll see is in some LLMs, they have a thumbs up or thumbs down. That's a feedback loop. That's one way to get user input. The other way is to like, if they give you a thumbs down, ask them why, right? Right. So there's a lot of little things we can do if you're a really good UX practitioner that the nuance. Like that's the thing. It's if you know UX, even without knowing UI, you can still apply a lot of Nielsen's like old school methodologies and apply them
Oh yeah.
today, and they still hold solid. So that's the part I actually feel more disappointed about, because some of his old school stuff still holds, and it's almost like it got thrown away, like the baby with the bathwater, right?
Yeah. So how do we ensure AI doesn't amplify existing
Mm.
exclusion and bias?
I love that question because right now a lot of people aren't. A lot of people are not
This is the goal
considering that.
of the conversation here. If you're listening and you're in leadership, listen like instantly.
So let's talk about that, right? Because I think that's missing. I think that's missing from workflows. Like what people want is just to shoehorn in like AI stuff without consideration for the human. But then if they don't even consider the human experience, they're not even going to think about like the disabled human experience. If they're not even thinking of like the general population, they're not going to think of a fraction of the population. So I would say a lot of it is about discipline, right? These executives like are, and I'll give this to some people. Like I've never met an executive that wasn't disciplined, right? Like thank God, I guess. Like they're like, say what you will about them. They're like, some of them like get up at 5 a.m. They do their workout, they go to work, they hustle, they have this hustle mindset. That's why they want
Yeah.
everybody to be the same like them. But the difference is you're getting paid millions of dollars and you're paying us crumbs. So we're not going to have the same motivation, right? So let's talk about like ego and discipline. If you're really good at your job, you're going to have the discipline to see the whole picture. And a lot of that is also includes any gaps, any leaks in the experience. And the biggest leak right now is accessibility. That's where they can sue you. And right now people need money. So guess what? They're going to look at you with dollar signs. So like if you can't get through the heart, you get through the money, you get through the pocketbook, and you say, look, it's $5,000 a pop for certain violations. It's 25,000 for others. And there's predatory people out there currently going on like US banking websites trying to find the accessibility holes because they know it's quick money for them. Right. So, like, bring that up and bring up the concept of discipline to people. And all of a sudden, you'll see it's part of the workflow. Right. But you have to get their ear because a lot of times they hear Nielsen say, well, accessibility is expensive. And they take that at face value, not realizing, hey, you're paying like, let's say, $250,000 for, this accessibility like team. Right. But they can sue you for millions. So
Yeah,
is it really expensive?
they should be citing like the Target lawsuit from years ago. I believe it was the Foundation for the Blind, or
Oh,
that
wow.
sued Target many years ago, and there have been several other accessibility class action lawsuits that people can easily Google, easily like look up, easily. Hell, you can use your LLMs and say, list me out and cite sources to all the cases of class action lawsuits,
There you go.
cases.
I
No,
mean,
and
she
you're
just
right.
said it. Yadi just said it. It was 250,000,
Yeah.
whereas like Meta and YouTube were sued for what, $380 million because of
Yeah,
addictive design patterns.
that's
Yep.
right.
Yep.
Come on,
And
right?
that's
That's a drop
one
in the bucket.
Totally.
drop in the bucket. And if we let her up again to like, no, like don't even worry about being a good human. Be a good business person. Just cover that leak, patch it up, right? Patch up that leak by doing X, Y, and Z. And it's simple. It's pennies on the dollars.
So speaking of being good, there's a New York Times article that just came out recently about Waymo. And it featured blind riders really enjoying Waymos. My wife and I just experienced a Waymo for the first time this last weekend in San Francisco. And then when I was in the hotel, I was reading this article, and I noticed that we were noticing that of all the chimes and all of the signals, like all of the other signals of everything, that it was telling you to be able to get into the car. It says so from the article. There were a lot of the people that are enjoying the Waymos that are blind. They're enjoying being able to ride alone and have their own independence, being able to choose their own music and not need a sighted person to be with them to do that. So it gives them kind of some independence. The downside is if you're in a wheelchair right now, you can't get into a Waymo. Waymo doesn't have any type
Wheelchair
of wheelchair
accessible.
ramps or any type of things like that, which made me think of going back to the Marvel comics and the superhero stuff. There's a meme about the X Mansion, which is the X-Men's mansion. The X-Men famously have a leader in a wheelchair, and if you look at all the artists that have ever drawn the X-Men, they always forget to put a ramp.
That's
So
so
it's
true.
always just stairs.
Oh my God, that's such a you know what? I didn't even think about that, but you're right. Yeah, when you sent me that article, like, yeah, a smile came on my face because I'm like, that is so brilliant. Like being alone in the car, which I take for granted. I take for granted being alone in the car, yelling when I'm angry, yelling at traffic, being like, get out of my way. Like it's simple stuff like that. And I took that for granted when I read that. I was like, man, wow. Like it kind of gives you context because I kind of took for granted that, yeah, like you can just have a human, but sometimes you don't want a human. Sometimes you don't. You want to like self-service. You just want to like be alone. And, you could be alone, like not in a car, right? Like I said, like my mom's friend's friend, right? But like actually be in a car in a vehicle that drives, right? Like alone. I was like, that's eye-opening, right? Because I mean, I'm always learning, right? Like I consider myself an accessibility like advocate, but even I'm a dum-dum, right? Like when it comes to certain things, until I talk to them and I hear from them like the whys, right? Like, why is this special or why does this suck? Right? All the time. Like, by the way, I'm mostly focused on the why does this suck because that helps me do my job better. But the why is this awesome is the part that actually lit my heart. I was like, ah, like that is so cool. Like, and that just
That is-
doesn't apply to blind people. It can apply to people that like don't know how to drive. Right. Like my 21-year-old neighbor, she's like wants to learn how to drive, but she's scared, but she's never like we're in Chicago, so you don't really need to know how to drive. But how cool would that be, like, also for her to feel independent, right?
Mhm.
Oh, that was such a beautiful article. I'm so glad that, like, you shared it.
Yeah, there's another feature that I thought Waymo did that was good, which is the unlock button, where you can enter a vehicle without, where you can have it unlocked already. But
Mhm.
one thing I did wonder about was, would the door itself open for you? I've seen vehicles where you
Ah,
could do like a hand movement now. I believe it was like the Escalade Cadillac or something, and the door opens.
Mhm.
Have you guys seen this? And if you're
yeah,
in the
I've seen it with
vehicle,
trunks. I've seen it with trunks where you wave your foot at the bottom and then it pops it
yeah,
open. I thought that was so cool. I was like, "Oh, my
right,
foot," you
and
know?
right, yeah, and so, like, getting in and out of a vehicle as well, I think is, like, just, again, these kind of baby steps into including everyone, specifically anything where I don't know what the gesture would be, but something that kind of gives, anybody access to not necessarily needing to open doors, close doors, and other capabilities. I think it's just, we're in a cool time. I thought that was like a very cool experience. So, Waymo doesn't yet. What it does is unlock the vehicle, not open the door itself. But if you're listening, Waymo, putting the
Mhm.
door, to me, would, I think, just, again, it not only just includes the small group of users that may need to use it, but you're thinking about what Yadi said, a mother with things in her hand, beside, like, let's say, an infant, and just like moving things around. If vehicles become autonomous, these are things that we need immediately, because it becomes just like another necessity.
I love that. I love that you brought that up because I'm like, oh, I love sensors and gestures, right? Like one of my patents is in gestures. I've been wanting to do ASL at banking. So anyone who wants to steal that idea, right? Being able to do like
Oh, that's
ASL
cool.
at an ATM, which is possible. I've been trying to pitch it. I know I've been trying to pitch it forever, but nothing.
Totally do that. That would be
Right?
easy to, oh my,
Yeah, I mean,
I can
it's
totally
not
see that.
easy, but it's
Yeah.
possible now, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. Yeah.
possible. There's databases now with the gestures and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, like what you just said about the sensors and the mom and the kid or someone who just recently broke their arm, like the
Yeah.
use cases are
Oh,
really endless,
yeah.
right?
They're
Like
just
you
like
never
all over,
know.
right? And yeah, and you're really talking about, it's like continuous and variable. It's like
Mhm.
maybe your eyesight will come back, you have, a surgery. Your arm will be healed and you're not going to need that capability. So think about it from the building of these apps, of, the settings of change, like, yes, unlock the door and open the vehicle for me. There's all these other reasons why. And so I think when you were talking about prompting, I wanted to bring this up earlier, talking about how, if AI could amplify, not amplify exclusion and bias. You brought up, well, if we maybe prompting the AI for our, experience, our current scenario, I think would be like, do you do that currently, where you ask
Mhm.
someone, I don't know what your role is, or, other kind of aspect of who the user is, in order to, have them have a more delightful experience?
Oh man, I love this question because it's not something I came up on my own, right? I do it,
Okay.
but it's because my UX researcher friend, he brought it up. I mean, I want to mention his name, but you know who you are, JF. I'm just going to call him JF. But he's the one that talk about an inference, right? Like, what can we infer from the user's action, right? So he's all into behavioral economics, and he's such a lovely human that like offline we'll talk about this type of stuff. So it's through that type of stuff you can infer a lot. Now, keep in mind, I don't necessarily do it for accessibility all the time, but I do it for like, where are they money wise? How worried are they about the money, right? Keep in mind the context is I work in banking, right? So that's the context. So like I'm like, okay, if I know how worried they are about money, if I know like what their mindset is around money, then I can actually kind of think through like the best way to say certain things without offending people, right? Because the last thing you want to do, like
Smart.
you don't want to talk to like the multimillionaire the same way you talk to someone that's like on the brink, right? They have different problems. They have different like they have different views of money, they have different situations, but also there's a different level of empathy, right? I may have more empathy towards the person that's about to lose their house than the person that's just going to buy another house to make like another real estate deal, right? Like that's another situation, that's an upsell, that's whatever. But the person that's about to lose their house, it's almost like whatever. But if we apply that to like, inferring, right? Let's apply that same concept to accessibility. There's a lot of stuff you can infer. You can see, and this is what I'm trying to get companies to do, and I don't know if it'll happen. The smart ones listen, but you can actually train the system, right? Like if the system can kind of look, and that's what AI is great for behind the scenes, right? A lot of my job is behind the scenes. It's not in the UI, it's behind the UI, right? That powers the interaction. But the behind the UI UX would be like, all right, how can we train the system so that the system can then have enough data points to infer certain things about you? So if you always come in and make the text larger, well, let's assume that you need glasses. Right. And that goes back to the whole Nielsen thing of like, all right, well, let's adapt the UI to how you use it. Right. And we're not talking about like what sections of the website you go to. We're talking about like from settings. Like if you're always going into settings and muting yourself or unmuting yourself or doing this or doing that, or like, disabling alerts. Right. Like, what type, because you can even infer from that. Like, okay, sometimes you'll turn off alerts and sometimes you'll turn them on. And if we notice we sent you an alert about you missing a payment, we can kind of infer that you want those alerts, but you don't want the other alerts, right? So there's certain things that even timeline or time wise can tell you about the user, right? Like, so if we know like, oh, you always sign in at night, you don't sign in during the day, what can we do, right? Or you always use night mode, right? So like, and those are slightly accessibility because we don't know. We don't know the person that's using it if they're using it for a preference, like, oh, I like night mode, or because technically that's the best view for them because that's how they can see, right? We don't know that, but we can infer certain things. So I'd say like the more we can do that, and unfortunately, I've had to do it in a sneaky way. Like I don't let people know I think about this. I just think about it, I do it, I design for it, and I code for it, but then that's it. I don't mention it, I don't brag about it. I don't tell people, look at what I did behind the scenes. I'm like, it's gonna be good, right? Like that's how I do things. I'm very, very sneaky about doing good.
We should also quickly just mention that a lot of the accessibility features, when people add them in, also are benefits for people that may not have disabilities, such as the use case of like captions, where it's
Yeah.
like if maybe someone in your house is on the phone and you're watching television and you want to flip on the captions, that is now a thing you're able to watch, that benefits you. Um, one, so I know we're pretty close to time, but one quick question I would love to ask you is what would you like designers that don't have the personal stake in accessibility when they're in the room? What would you like them to understand? What would you like them to like kind of take away?
Well, depending on who they are, right? They either think about how they could personally be sued, right? Because I've seen it. I'm laughing now, but I'm like, yeah, like I've never personally been sued for accessibility. But if you're that designer, and believe you me, if you don't think about accessibility, someone will throw you under the bus, right? If stuff hits the fan,
Oh,
right?
say more about that.
Well, I mean, you can get sued for anything nowadays. And if people find out that you're the root cause, like it makes it a stronger case sometimes to sue a specific person alongside the company, right? And in finance, it's typical to actually get sued a lot personally for like financial type of crimes, right? So like, now that people need money, they're going to find any way to sue you. So like in the very least for self-interest, protect yourself. Like that's the baseline. The baseline is try not to get sued. Don't do anything that's going to get you sued. Right. And that means like you doing your own checklist of like, all right, I did the due diligence of making sure that the headers were labeled right. I made sure I worked in the ARIA's, screen reader. Like accessibility actually isn't that hard, right? You can take courses, like there's people that offer courses for like 50 or $100. Like my friend Megan Thomas, she does accessibility courses and she focuses on a different side. She focuses on the content. Because even by the way, even from a content perspective, not making things cluttered, making things like organized, simple. By the way, what you guys would consider standard UX, right? Like basic UX is actually great accessibility. So people don't realize accessibility isn't that hard. You just have to be aware of it. So I would say it's a gradient, it's a spectrum. I would say in the very least, cover your A, make sure that like you're not liable personally for anything that you do and that you do your best. Now, if you can't do things because you're just a little guy in the big pyramid of people above you, right? You can only do what you do. But at least from a legal perspective, you've done the due diligence, right? Even if it's not in banking or regulated industry, right? To all the way to like, fine, you don't have a personal stake in it yet, right? And I say yet because you don't know what the future holds. You could have an accident, have a brain injury, you could lose an arm, you could do like, you don't know like how much
Yeah.
time you have with your current abilities. And we know like certain things degrade over time. Your eyesight degrades over time, maybe other stuff like mobility, perhaps chronic illness can do a number on you and you don't know until you get there. So having
That's
that empathy now, right?
That's such a good point. I remember somebody saying to me, Eve, I don't know if it was maybe you and I were talking about it one time where it's like it only takes a car accident,
Yeah.
to become disabled. Like it's a very and car accidents are very common, right?
Yep.
So like yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And like I'm always thinking of risks. So I'm like, oh my God. And I think of the possibilities and I'm like, oh my God. So like I'm like the worst person for it, but at the same time, that also helps me like keep my even keel in terms of like, all right, selfishly, I'm also doing it for me in the future. Right. Like I'm creating stuff that I can use, right? Because I don't know what the future holds. So yeah, I
Totally.
would say like you could have all brain and just focus on your, CYA, right? Or you can have all heart and focus on like everybody else, or you can have a nice balanced view of I don't want to get sued, but also let's help people. Because like you said, Brian, like what you said with captions, you don't have to be deaf to like take appreciation of that.
Mhm.
Absolutely, the use
Exactly.
case you mentioned, absolutely. And not just that, another use case is late at night and you don't want to wake up the kid. Very similar use case. Like the
Mhm.
more modes there are for something, the better, to be honest. It is more expensive, but like it's not majorly expensive. It's just a little bit more expensive and it adds so much more value, right? So instead of looking at this as a cost center, as like Nielsen would say, it's expensive. It's like, well, by what standards? Right? Like, is it more money that you have to pay to a professional? Sure. But can those professionals actually save you money and make you money over time? Right? Because that's the other thing people don't realize. Like, just an example in banking, people tend to skew older, right? Hello. If we can make banking products a lot easier for the 55 plus, right? That's money in the bag, right? But again, the really rich people have assistants. But it's, you know what I'm saying? So like there's always a compromise there. But yeah, I would say like it's a gradient, right? Like think about it like from both a practical and an emotional standpoint, you know?
Yaddy, this was such a good conversation. I want to give users the ability to, if they want to, I don't know, find out what else you're doing, where can people find you?
Oh, just LinkedIn. That's it. Like that's like I don't have any other channels. I don't use Instagram. And if there, by the way, there is an Instagram with my face on it. That's not me. That's some rando. I reported them like a long time ago. Yeah, they use my name. I'm like, that's not me. I mean, it looks like me because it's me. They stole it from like my Facebook. But yeah, no, I'm on LinkedIn and you can look me up, Yaddy Arroyo, the name on the screen.
All right.
I'm right there.
We'll link you in the show
Thank
notes.
you.
Oh, nice. Thank you.
Absolutely.
All
Awesome.
right. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Bye.
Thank everyone.
Like, subscribe, and follow, or become our next victim of bad UX.
UX Murder Mystery is a joint production of Eve, User Experience Design Agency, and Crowley UX, where systems meet stories. It's hosted by Brian J. Crowley and Eve Eden. Edited by Kelsey Smith. Intro animation and logo design by Brian J. Crowley. The music is by Nicholas Lee. You can follow us at UX Murder Mystery. You can email us at questions@uxmurdermystery.com. UX Murder Mystery is a copyright 2025, Brian J. Crowley and Eve Eden. Thanks for listening.